Well, you're talking to a lot of legislature enthusiasts here. CEBV
Lucky
follows
you.
this. Oh, yeah. Have you met the Arizona legislature?
Well, I've met your incredible minority leader or speaker. I forget what you guys call him, but Oscar de los Santos
Oh,
uh,
yeah, he's
for our
wonderful.
candidates. We're very proud to support him.
We love Oscar.
He's
Absolutely.
the
They
best.
do amazing work, against incredible odds. Our legislature is something else. Um, so we often feel that one of the problems with our democratic process is that too few actual grassroots leaders are in leadership,
Yeah.
grassroots organizers. So, what is your perspective about elected office, now that you've been organizing on the ground for so many years?
Well, I'm going to say something that not a lot of our politicians or legislators can say, but needs to be said. Today, I was just calling through former candidates of ours, um, candidates who we worked with, obviously, in the past, people who were considering running for office this cycle. And there were two conversations I had, one with a state legislator, not in Arizona, but in a different state, where I asked him, you were elected and this is your first term. What did you need that you didn't have so that groups like Leaders We Deserve can support you more and find more people like you to get elected to office? And what he said was honestly, more than anything, it is how incredibly financially hard it is to be a state legislator in many states. So, for example, this one was not in Texas, but in Texas, they're paid 7 grand a year, basically, to be a state legislator. And they have to take 6 months off every 2 years to be in the legislature. And then just a few minutes later, I called a different person, a friend of mine who was called me while I was on vacation just last week. So we weren't able to talk at that time. But I called him back and he said, well, last week I was really interested in running for the state legislature in Texas. However, in the time since, I've done the math and looked at the um, how much it's going to cost. And the fact of the matter is, I can't financially make that leap of deciding to run, especially because I have a daughter and I won't be able to support her as much as I want to because this legislature does not pay enough. In a state with a GDP bigger than most countries, they are paying their state legislators 7 grand a year. Is it any wonder why there is so much corruption, right? Why so many of the people that are in power only reflect what privilege looks like instead of what the actual American people or Texans look like. So I would say one of the biggest challenges is the fact that they are not paid enough. We expect our legislators to effectively be full-time politicians while giving them less than part-time pay. And the results aren't very good a lot of the time. And you get what you pay for, right? If we want people to be the best legislators possible, we need them to make that their full-time job and ensure that they don't have any conflicts of interest while they're in the legislature. And so that's just one of the biggest problems that we have out there is just the fact that our legislators are not paid enough, our local elected officials are not paid enough. And obviously, I'm not saying that we need to make them rich by any means, but we need to actually pay them a living salary if we want to actually have people that are able to run for office. And then we also need to talk about the fact that it costs a ridiculous amount of money to run for office. It is incredibly hard to raise that money. And how that just invites more corruption because you're going to get more corporations, you're going to get more special interests. And that's why Leaders We Deserve exists. We saw for young people a real need for an organization that finds the best of the best of our generation and puts real money behind them. Sometimes that's several $100,000, sometimes it's $1 million+ that we'll put behind a candidate because we're that serious of helping these young people get across the finish line.
Mhm. Well, in Arizona, legislators make $24,000 a year and they work for about 6 months out of every year. So they do have a pretty respectable per diem, but that allows some of them to make some really decent money, but it's extremely inequitable. And we actually do support paying legislators more. So that is not an unpopular opinion at all. So I'm still curious, why did you gravitate to electoral politics? There are a lot of different avenues that your interests could have gone. You could have gone into journalism or, news reporting. So why did you choose electoral politics?
Because, um, when you're a journalist, you're expected to basically just talk about everything that's wrong a lot of the time, and you can't really necessarily advocate for a certain position. And what I realized is if I went out there after Parkland and just spoke as a student journalist, could we have had some impact? Sure. But it wouldn't have been nearly as effective because it's like, okay, this is everything that's wrong. What are you going to do to change it? And the easy part is talking about what's wrong. The easy part is criticizing, right? The hard part is saying, what the hell are you going to do differently? And that's where our state legislators, that's where our elected officials come in. And that's where electoral politics comes into this. What I see this as is frankly, I was getting with the work we were doing at March for Our Lives, I was getting exhausted. As you can imagine, you, like anybody, I don't want to talk about the worst day of my life every day for the rest of my life. And on top of that, there's lots of issues that I care about that all come into gun violence, whether it's affordable housing, whether it's, climate change, because we know that as cities get hotter, there's more gun violence, for example, in the summer. Or uh, just talking about gun laws generally. And what I saw this as was after Maxwell's elected, we were working with the White House to try to push them to create something called the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, something that we, March for Our Lives, had helped to come up with the idea for in 2019 when I was just 19 years old. And I met with the White House after Biden was elected repeatedly to talk with them about creating this office and was given the runaround around, just all the lip service in the world about why this couldn't happen and why it wasn't a good idea. Um, and after Maxwell was elected, the first bill he introduced was create the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, which helped to push the administration to create it within the White House instead of at the DOJ, because that would have required an act of Congress. It would have been really hard to get around the filibuster, but nonetheless, they were able to create it at the White House. And that office was created in part because of Maxwell's pressure that he put on as the first Gen Z member of Congress. And it oversaw the two largest one-year reductions in gun homicide in American history, to the point that this year, compared to 2021, we should be on track to have about 20 to 25% fewer gun homicides than we did in 2021. And by the numbers that I've seen, conservatively speaking, between a 30 and 40% reduction in mass shootings compared to 2021. Um, I don't think that would have been possible without the creation of that office, because we needed to pass the Safer Communities Act after Uvalde and Buffalo, but we needed somebody in the White House, at least one or two people, to say, hey, X state, there's $10 million available for you here from the Safer Communities Act that you just need to fill out this application for to enforce your red flag laws. Here's a couple $1 million to fund a violence intervention program so that you're preventing gun violence before it happens by getting somebody into therapy that has been traumatized by gun violence, by getting a young person a job, by getting them counseling, by getting them mentorship, whatever they need so they don't feel the need to pick up a gun. And without my, when I saw all that happening and I saw the success that Maxwell had, I said, this is really amazing what the gun safety movement is doing, but we need to do more work to bring this generation in that has gone through school shooter drills into office. Because I looked back at President Biden's generation, I looked back at the last time that we had, young people hiding under their desks from a weapon of mass destruction. And I looked at President Biden's generation that went through nuclear bomb drills, right? Where the difference was for them, the bomb never went off. But for us, it does multiple times a year after while we're doing these school shooter drills. And my hope is that by bringing in these young people, similar to Joe Biden's generation, when he was 29, when he was first elected, we can hopefully get them to have that anxiety and experience to actually change gun laws the same way that Biden's generation passed some of the largest arms reduction treaties after, the New START and START 1 and 2 treaties in human history. And this is a way of essentially hedging the bets of the gun safety movement and the youth movement, more broadly speaking, to say, all right, if our government doesn't change our gun laws, we will change who is in government, not only by outliving them, but actively fighting to replace them as well.
I hate to ask, but is that office still there?
No, it is not. And also a lot of the funding, it's a great question. It's a hard answer, but it's great that you asked that. That office is no longer there. It was demolished by the current administration, unsurprisingly. And they also cut off funding to community violence intervention programs that was authorized by Congress through the Safer Communities Act that is responsible for cities like DC being at 30-year lows for homicides right now. That is responsible for cities like Baltimore being in a place where I think they haven't had this is the lowest rate of, I think, shootings that they have had. I want to say in like 50 years or some crazy number like that. I need to check again, but it is a decades low number that Baltimore is at right now, and places like New York and elsewhere are at, where the administration has now cut that funding to those programs that, by the way, don't have anything to do at all with gun laws, and simply say, okay, we know that this group of young people is the most at risk of either being a victim or committing an act of gun violence. There's typically a lot of overlap there because it's retaliation between, a group of people. What these programs did was to say, we're going to get you a job. We're going to get you counseling. We're going to get you whatever you need so that you don't feel the need to pick up a gun. They saved our government hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars because of the shootings that they have prevented and the investigations that did not happen, the families that did not need to be torn apart through incarceration following those investigations and putting them through the court process, and saved law enforcement lives because then they don't have to respond to the shooting that does not happen. But here's the problem with part of what our party has to deal with, which is the fact that we stop a lot of terrible stuff from happening, but you do not get rewarded for that. You don't. You don't get rewarded for the shooting that does not happen because of the red flag law. You do not get rewarded for the child that does not go hungry because of the expanded child tax credit. You do not get rewarded when families like mine don't go bankrupt because of the Social Security safety net that Democrats built, so that when people like my father are permanently disabled and literally on their deathbed, their family doesn't also face a financial death sentence. But guess what? We still do that work because we're Democrats. And we're here to make government actually work for the people and not run on the idea that government sucks and then prove it by doing a terrible job like Republicans love to do.
Yes. Well, that leads right into my next question, but before I get to that, I also want to mention we've been focusing on vaccines as well, and the NIH and all the cancellation of vaccine contracts, and that is exactly the same issue. We are dealing with disease that does not happen. So that is why, one of the reasons why people sort of blow off vaccines. So same human problem. So the elephant in the room, you've talked about what Democrats do, but and I understand if you need to be diplomatic, but I can also assure you that there are plenty of people here who are incredibly frustrated with the Democratic Party. So my biggest question, and I mean, I feel this from the core of my being as a lifelong Democrat, why should I be a Democrat right now? What are Democrats doing that makes me want to be a Democrat?
Well, we're actively trying to change. I'll say that much.
Yeah.
We are the best chance that we have to defeat Donald Trump, but I think we need to do some real reflecting too on the fact that why have people lost faith in government being able to do the right thing, right? And that's not just because of bad Republican leadership, although I would say the 70 to 80% majority of it is, right? Um, it's also a consequence of the fact that in a lot of our blue states, it is really hard to build housing. And we force people, working class people, into other states because they cannot afford to live there anymore. I also think it comes from the fact that we are way too comfortable letting somebody stay in the same position and unchallenged for decades. And I know that is a controversial opinion, but we've said for 15, probably my whole life, I'm 25 years old. We probably said for 30 years at this point, it's a messaging problem. It's a messaging problem. It's a messaging problem. Sometimes, when do we need to ask ourselves, when does it stop being a messaging problem? And when is it more a messenger problem and a competition problem? And I think that what we need to do, the answer to our problems, is not to just walk away from the Democratic Party and say, screw it. That's the easy thing to do. That's not going to change things. That's not going to turn it around. It'd be a hell of a lot easier for me to do that. But I know the best chance that we have to promote stronger gun laws, the best chance that we have to promote all of the policies that we care about, is electing more courageous Democrats and having competition ferociously in our safe blue seats at a minimum. I'm not saying that it necessarily needs to be in our competitive seats right now, because I don't want to risk us losing the majority, either in a state legislature or in Congress because of that, but at least in our safe blue seats in our cities, and our safe seats within congressional seats and state legislative seats, to ensure a rigorous process of competition where people know you cannot just be in a position for 10, 20, 15, 30 years and expect to continue to be there because nobody's going to challenge you because you just tell everybody, well, I'm going to retire next cycle, and then you never do, which many members of Congress love to do to just avoid any primary challengers. And I think that the answer is that competition. And it is uncomfortable for those incumbents, but the fact of the matter is this culture of seniority politics that we are obsessed with in this party, and I know this is a controversial take for many, this culture of seniority politics, I am all for experience in office. But the reality is that experience only matters as much as it is effective. And I think it is proven to be ineffective at this point. And it's time for some new leaders. And it's not to say that we shouldn't have any older people in office. We need an intergenerational coalition. There are lots of great older people in office, right? That have amazing stories that will be great mentors to state legislators, to members of Congress, to whoever else it is. It's to say, let's make sure that we are defining how good we are based off of what we're actually doing and not just saying, well, I've been here for this many years, right? And that's build a truly intergenerational coalition in this party and acknowledge the fact that we are hemorrhaging young people and have a dying future in this party, in part because we do not actually want to win back young people. When we say that a lot of the time, what we want is young people to come to us. We want young sycophants that tell us what we want to hear instead of grappling with the uncomfortable truth of why we've lost a lot of those young people and actually listening to them and not just writing them off necessarily.
Mhm. Well, there are a lot of things that I'm curious about and concerned about with regard to that. Absolutely no argument about your premise, but in terms of challenging sort of complacent Democrats or office holders who have been in office for a, bazillion years, um, are you also looking at people who are really not representing true democratic values? I mean, there are certain
Absolutely.
Democrats who try to triangulate and become sort of Republican light because they're afraid that the progressive message is just too terrifying for people. And in Arizona, I mean, we have roughly a third, a third, a third. Democrats, Republicans, and independents. And by and large, young people are saying, a pox on both your parties. I'm going to be independent. So, or party not declared. So, um, I'm just very concerned, that the Democratic Party is not representing its own values very well. So are you looking at those office holders as well?
So what I'll say is it depends on the seat. For example, I don't agree with Jared Golden on a whole lot of stuff. I don't agree with Marie Perez on a whole lot of stuff. She is in a Trump plus 10 district, though. She is one of the Democrats that won in one of the most red districts of any congressional seat, if not the most red that we won last cycle. As much as I do not agree with her, we're in a real moment of crisis right now where we cannot afford to risk losing the House next cycle because somebody isn't necessarily as far to the left, or as progressive as I would like them to be. And I'm willing to swallow that pill, as painful as it is right now, because I know that it is going to be a hell of a lot harder for us to address gun violence if we live in an authoritarian state without elections, right? Or highly skewed elections that are effectively not free and fair. Um, and what I would say is that that goes into the mentality of what a lot of people talk about, where people say just vote blue no matter who. If you're going to say that, and progressives are saying, well, we're okay, even though we don't agree with necessarily everything this person is saying, we're okay with supporting them because we know that there's something much bigger at stake here. What that also means is when somebody like Zoran in New York City wins to the left of where you might be, if you're going to say vote blue no matter who, that also means supporting the person that is most representative of Democrats in New York City. And obviously, it's not to say every single person across the country is going to be Zoran. Every message is going to be different in every single community. But I think there's a lot to learn from listening to people and actually asking them, what do you want them to do for you as a candidate? And in terms of the people that we are going to challenge, it's going to be people in what are D+9 seats or more that have a political advantage of basically 59% towards the Democrat already, where it is very, very unlikely that it will be any Republican that is elected there, because we don't want to risk losing the House because of that. But we also want to make sure that we're challenging the precedent that we can just keep all the same people in power, where frankly, right now, being a Democrat feels like being a member of this party feels like looking at a chef who is trying very hard to make an omelet without breaking any eggs at all, and is shocked when there is no omelet, right? And people are starving, metaphorically speaking, right? And effectively, what I'm here to say is like, look, I'm fine to break as many eggs as we need to when we're in a moment of crisis. I don't think anybody, no matter how blue their seat is, should be comfortable. Period. Um, and that's what we're trying to foster in this party is a culture of safe, healthy competition in safe congressional seats, not in competitive seats where we could lose the majority, at least this cycle. Maybe in the future, when democracy is not nearly as much in danger, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, but that is not what we're looking to do right now. And let me be extremely clear as well. There's a lot of young people that suck too. There's lots of great older people. I wish that it was just like, oh, if you get above a certain age, you start sucking. It is not that simple. There's a lot of young people who are terrible, and that's part of the reason why Leaders We Deserve is so selective in who we are supporting. Because we do not want to support younger people that are to the right of the incumbent, which there are some around the country. We're looking to support truly progressive leaders that are the most representative possible and will give us the best chance possible of passing most representative of their constituents possible as possible, and give us the best chance of passing progressive legislation and doing everything we can to ensure it, at least in our state legislatures, for example, that Democrats are not put into making these difficult decisions because we actually win state legislatures and aren't gerrymandered out of power. Democrats had the House before I was born for decades.
Mhm.
For decades. Obviously, politics have changed a lot since then, but the reality is part of the reason we have to have these debates is because we are structurally forced into having them because of Republican gerrymandering that is disproportionately weaponized against Democrats.
Great. I do feel that progressive policies are a lot more popular than Democrats are. So hopefully, we can recognize that at some point. So I'm going to ask Isabel to step in and go through a few more questions with you. Isabel is our youth um, outreach coordinator and has been doing amazing work with us for a couple of years now. So, Isabel, can you join in?
Uh, Thanks, Kathy. And thank you so much, David, for joining us tonight. It's always good to talk to a fellow former high school speech and debate team member. There's a lot of solidarity there. So as we've discussed, your PAC is called Leaders We Deserve. When you say leaders we deserve, how do you define that? And what do you think are the defining characteristics that a leader should have?
um, Ethics and integrity. And what we think that looks like, at least for us, what we really talk about a lot of the time is refusing to take corporate PAC money and refusing to actively try to court independent expenditures, from those PACs as well, or using any of the loopholes that members of Congress love to say, where a lot of people who are running for Congress the first time will say, "Oh, I'm not taking corporate money." And then they'll get elected and they'll start taking corporate money because they're like, well, it was true when I was running the first time that I wasn't taking corporate money. Most corporate money goes to incumbents. It rarely goes to first-time candidates. And a lot of the time, what happens as well is even if they themselves, that candidate, is not taking corporate money, they're taking it in through what is called a leadership PAC, where they aren't necessarily taking it themselves for their campaign, but they're using that money to give to their friends and allies instead, which is still effectively the same thing in my opinion. And I think it's part of the reason why we're seeing in those no party affiliation thing, the growth of the no party affiliation movement in Florida and the unaffiliated movement, in Arizona and everything. I think part of that is because even though people may agree with Democrats more, they're like, well, we're both owned by corporations and special interests, and we're all corrupt because people just paint us with a broad brush. But what I'll say is, we're not the same. We actually do talk about major campaign finance reform, at least. And Republicans just don't at all. not nearly as much as we do. But for us, we're looking to help support young people that do not take corporate money, in part because they get so much substantial support from us that they don't have to in order to get elected. And that can help inspire other young people to look at them and be like, well, that person didn't take corporate money. And they were able to get way more support because of it. And I don't have to take it. So that we're able to break this cycle and end the broken campaign finance system so that hopefully one day, frankly, super PACs, I know this is ironic of me to say, so that hopefully super PACs don't exist anymore, legally speaking, but we can't unilaterally disarm because there are all these corporations and other groups that are doing it at the same time. But our hope is that one day, I wouldn't say that we're going to put leaders we deserve out of business because we don't need to exist, because I think there are always going to be a need to support young people, but hopefully we don't need to spend nearly as much in the future because we have a rigorous campaign finance system where outside spending is not possible anymore. And there's public financing of elections and other things like that. So one, our candidates not taking corporate money. Two, they have to support things like an assault weapons ban and comprehensive gun reform, obviously. And we have a whole other set of criteria that we really focus on, but those are the two main ones that we really, really look to hone in on, along with, are they obviously supportive of abortion rights? Are they supportive of major campaign finance reform? Supporting LGBT individuals, everything like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We're lucky in Arizona. We have a clean elections public campaign financing system, but we don't see a lot of candidates opt into it because of that broken cycle that you were referencing. We know that you've been working with Amanda Littman of Run for Something. So obviously, as you've touched on, you believe and know that young people should be in office within our current system. What would you say are the top 3 issues that young people and young voters want to address? And what do you think that young people bring to the table?
Well, I think I would say the top 3 issues that they really want to address is it's not dissimilar from a lot of older people. Stuff is way too expensive. Housing is way too expensive, especially. And I think they want politicians more than anything, regardless of what the issue is, who listens to them and not special interests. I think there is so much cynicism that everybody is just so corrupt that it doesn't matter what you do, that nothing's ever going to change. But that's the reason why nothing ever changes, because everybody thinks that in the first place. And I'm trying to remember the other part of your question. What was the other part of it?
Oh, it was it was 2 parts. What would be the top 3 issues that young people want to address? And also, what do young people bring to the table as candidates? Which you kind of touched on both there, but if you'd like to expand on either.
Well, what I'll say about young people being candidates is they bring 2 really valuable assets. Sometimes, and I got to be clear in how I say this, I think they are naive enough to believe that change is actually possible, which is an asset in and of itself, because a lot of older people get so damn jaded that they don't even bother trying, right? Because just like the people that told us after Parkland, nothing's going to change. It doesn't really matter because you're just we've seen this story before, and the state's just not going to change. So I think that kind of naiveness is a very valuable asset, because they don't know how hard it actually is to make change, so they actually believe it's possible. And oftentimes that is the biggest obstacle to creating it, is actually believing that you can. And then I would say the other thing is their youth, as a product of their youth, they are naturally expected to fail. And they are held to a much higher standard by the media, by older Democrats, by elected officials, and others, because they are expected to fail. And that level of accountability, I think, actually is a huge asset, because either they do fail and they're quickly replaced or not in that leadership role anymore, or they do an excellent job, like Anderson Clayton, for example, in North Carolina, who won in a huge upset victory to become the chair of the North Carolina Democratic Party, and has helped to lead that state to the point that they broke the supermajority last cycle in the state legislature, in part with the help of one of our candidates, Dante Pittman, who we spent $100,000 supporting. But nonetheless, I think her youth is part of the reason why she has become so successful, is because she believes that change actually is possible, and she knows that she has a laser on her constantly, where people are going to expect her and other young people not to succeed necessarily in a way that a lot of older people, frankly, just don't have. And I don't understand why that is, why we're so accepting of older, incompetent people. I think it's just because we assume like they're just naturally going to be competent. There's a lot of young, incompetent people. There's also a lot of older, incompetent people as well.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I'm a huge fan and admirer of Anderson Clayton and her work in North Carolina. Kind of along those lines, who are some up and coming young leaders that you think our team and our audience should keep an eye on?
Young and upcoming leaders. Well, I think that Deja Fox still has a great future in Arizona. I think that she's an incredible communicator that can inspire a lot of young people across the state to run in the future and across the country to run. Um, I would also say Oscar de los Santos, obviously, who many of you know. I wish I could replicate Oscar 1,000 times, and just like I won't say I wish every one of our candidates could be like him, but I wish every one of our candidates could have some version of him, frankly, just in terms of how smart he is, how driven he is, how competent he is, how effective he is. Um, and in terms of one of the current candidates that we have who's endorsed is State Senator Robert Peters in Illinois, who was in Obama's former state Senate district, and he's now running for Congress. He's been incredibly successful in the state legislature, has a really amazing story, and I highly suggest that you guys go and check him out. Um, Other young people, Greg Casar, obviously, who's currently in Congress, is somebody that I have a lot of admiration for. And then I'm just trying to think of state legislators. Molly Cook, that is a name that I think you all are going to start to hear a lot more of over the next 5 years or so, if not sooner. She is the youngest state senator in Texas. We helped support her. We spent $310,000 on her campaign. In Texas, there's no contribution limits at all. Fun fact. And we ended up supporting her campaign, and she was running. Most people would look at this race and be like, this race doesn't matter because it's a blue seat. But the reality is she was running against a Democrat who, when that Democrat was in the state house, had voted to arm teachers and voted to give them $25,000 for being armed. As a Democrat, he did that. Molly is an abortion rights advocate and ER nurse who has treated victims of gun violence and is a incredibly hard fighter. And Yasmin also is great, obviously. Don't mean to forget to mention her. And I got a call from a member of Congress in Texas the other day, and he was like, I'm so glad that you supported Molly, because Molly, despite being written off by the political establishment, being told all the reasons why she couldn't win and everything like that, she ended up winning by 62 votes in that election. And I got a call from a member of Congress just 2 weeks ago where he's like, I'm so glad that you supported Molly, because she is leading harder than almost any state senator in this state to fight against redistricting. And just today, she walked out of the state Senate. So keep your eyes on Molly Cook.
Wow, I definitely will. And I see a lot of love for her in the chat, as well as a lot of love for our amazing young leaders in Arizona that we're super lucky to have. So I'll preface this next question by saying that you can say both. But should young people, in your opinion, run for local office or federal office first? Do you think that it's important for young leaders to get a little bit more experience at the local level in like a school board seat or a city council seat before they run for a national office like Congress?
I think it is possible to do both. If you look at somebody like LBJ, right? I think the first thing he ever ran for, I could be wrong. I could be misremembering this part of Robert Caro's books on him, but I'm pretty sure the first office that he ran for was Congress when he was 28. And I think part of the reason he became so effective and responsible for passing so much monumental legislation certainly was not because he was very progressive necessarily by any means. It was because he had incredible relationships that he had built up over decades from starting that young in Congress. that he built up in the House and in the Senate from starting at that age that enabled him to be pushed by the civil rights movement to pass so much monumental legislation, like the Great Society, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, etc., because he started when he was 28, in my opinion. I don't think if he started when he was 60, not that there shouldn't be 6-year-olds in Congress, I'm just saying it would be a lot harder for him to have those. He wouldn't have those decades of relationships that you need to have to really be an effective president. If you look at Joe Biden, he was 29 when he was first elected to the Senate. And it's a similar story. Pushed from the left and got a massive amount of progressive legislation done. If you look at FDR, it's a similar story. He was 29 when he was first elected, pushed and passed, obviously, the New Deal and tons of other legislation. And let me just say this. If we're going to have a body like Congress that has so much control over the future of this country, we need people in there who are going to live to see the consequences decades down the line of the laws that they are passing now. Currently, why don't you guys take a guess about this in the chat? If we had a proportional number of just 25 to 30-year-olds, I'm not talking 18 to 30, just 25 to 30. If we had the same same percentage of 25 to 30-year-olds in Congress as we do in the general population, does anybody want to guess how many members of Congress we would have under the age of 30 if it was proportional just to 25 to 30-year-olds? Isabel, do you have a guess?
Oh my gosh, I do not have a guess. I see Corey says 162 in the chat. Julie says 112. Beth says 26. Kathy just put 200. Anyone
So,
close there?
but what's your guess?
My guess, if Kathy's going 200, Kathy, I will always follow her lead. So I'll copy her for sure.
Okay. Well, it's not 200. Does anybody want to guess how many members of Congress are under 30 right now? Before I give you the answer? It's one. It's Maxwell Frost. You know how many we would have between under 30 if it was proportional to 25 to 30-year-olds? It is over 40 members of Congress that are under the age of 30. So yes, there should be people that run for local office. That is super, super important. But we need to have, in my opinion, and I know this is extremely controversial, I think maybe it's not necessarily that we need to have an exact number of 40 members of Congress under 30, although I think that would be great. It's to say maybe we should have, 20 or 25 or 30 or God forbid 40, right? That actually can get that experience and start working there and know how to get things done. Yeah.
Yeah, very radical representative democracy. Be crazy. But yeah, I would love to see more young leaders at all levels of elected office and have their communities be accurately represented. I've seen a couple questions in the chat about Turning Point, which I'm sure you're unfortunately probably pretty familiar with at this point. In Arizona, we have a really large presence of Turning Point organizers. They're recruiting heavily, they're hiring heavily in very targeted areas. I just recently graduated from Arizona State, and I saw every day their presence on our colleges and university campuses. They're also having a really big presence in high schools as well, so starting very early. From your perspective, is there any type of plan or strategy that the left could start taking to counter this effort, or any ideas that you have?
Yeah, but it's going to require about probably between 100 and 200 million dollars every 2 years. And the fact of the matter is, we love to say we love young people in this party. We do not put funding behind them anywhere near enough at all. It is insane. The level of funding that Turning Point gets in comparison to what the entirety of the Democratic youth infrastructure gets, it is like a match in a hurricane. It is nowhere close. So it is, and I have experience in that field. March for Our Lives is a C3 and C4 that really focuses on like helping to turn out young people to vote for gun safety candidates and doing lobbying and legislation and everything like that on guns. our budget is about $3 million a year still. We've existed for about 8 years. And we've punched above our weight with that. But the reality is, if you really want to build something like a turning point on the left, you're going to need way more money than that space is currently at all going to be willing to put money up for in any way, shape, or form. It's not to say that we shouldn't try, but it's to say I think that when I looked at the landscape, my view of it is I would rather give young people the right representation to look at somebody like Maxwell or Zoran, where in Zoran's case, we saw 18 to 24-year-olds turn out to vote at a rate 3 times higher in the primary than the general presidential election. Think about that. That is extremely abnormal for a primary. That is almost always decided by people that are over the age of 60, right? It is virtually unprecedented for what happened in New York City to happen like that. But it shows the value of having a candidate who people actually feel represented by, that expands the electorate. And now we're seeing the Democrat, not the party, I wouldn't say, but at least members of the Democratic Party in New York State are treating him. That's the challenge of Turning Point. They have so much money. And if we're going to start anywhere, it's basic math. We are not going to be able to match them with how much money they give to all their chat. I mean, it was like pulling. I can't get into this, but we need to give college Dems and young Dems way more funding so that they can have more sustainability. And we need our youth infrastructure to be more sustainably funded and led. Part of the challenge is you need it to be youth led, but you need those young people to stick around and get a little bit older so they can continue to build the thing and not just have it, be passed on to somebody who isn't actually equipped to take it to the next level.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as someone, I have experience leading a college Dems university chapter, and I definitely saw what you're saying in terms of it's just not even comparable, the funding on either side. Um, I know we're coming to time, and you're probably in a time zone that's much later than us, so we really appreciate you hopping on. Before we close out for the evening, any final thoughts you'd like to share or actions that you'd recommend our team and our audience take to better support young leaders in our communities?
Well, I'm sure some of you are already donating to Leaders We Deserve, so thank you to those of you. And we're supported by small dollar grassroots donors around the country, 200,000 of them, that enable me so that when a donor calls me and says, I'm not going to give money to you anymore because you supported Zoran, I can say that's okay because he got young people at the end of the day. And that's what we're here to do. We're not here to just court donors. We're here to help win back young people. So thank you guys for supporting us. And the thing that I really could use your help with, especially in Arizona, help me find young people that are running who would be good to run for state legislature or for Congress in the coming years. Even if they're not ready to run yet, have them sign up at our website and just say that they're not ready to run yet, but they want to be put in our resume bank. The biggest challenge that we have is candidate quality. A lot of the young people who want to run for office should not run for office. I talk to a lot of unqualified, disproportionately men who should not be running for office. God bless them. They're great. But what's really crazy to me is the drop off in talent that our party has in how many young women do not decide to run for office. That has been really striking. 90% of the organizers of March for Our Lives were women. Of the people, including our partners that we work with that help young people run for office, the breakdown usually of young people under the age of 30 who decide to run for office is typically 75% men or 70% men and 30 to 25% women. That means what that signals to me is there is a massive drop off in talented, incredibly qualified, and well-experienced young women who should be running for office but are not right now, that our party needs to do a much, much, much better job of getting resources behind. And we try to be although we're not an organization that's only focused on young women, supporting young female candidates. We are very deliberate. And last cycle, I think it was about 60% of our candidates that were female. But it is really disappointing to know how many thousands of people are out there that should run for office, especially younger women that just say like, oh, it's not my time or I'm not qualified. You know who doesn't ask that? These These fucking men, they don't. They don't ask that. They don't say that. They just say, fuck it, I'll figure it out. Sorry, pardon my French. That is what they say. They just do it. And we're here to find the best of our generation. And I really want this cycle, I want us to elect at least one or two of the first Gen Z women to Congress. Period. I do. And we need really high quality people. We need great young men too to sign up. There's a lot of them that do that though. Help us find young people of any gender who want to run for office and send them to our website. Email me. Email that if there's a candidate that you know of that may not be ready to run yet, but you think should, and we'll have our team reach out to them. Hopefully you can cut that part out when you put this on YouTube.
Oh no, we're keeping that part in for sure, for
Great.
sure.
Can't wait to see those emails.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and for imparting some of your wisdom on us. I know we all, myself included, really enjoyed hearing your thoughts on different parts of politics and youth engagement. For everyone joining us, Sundrop has dropped in the chat a few times the link to learn more about Leaders We Deserve and also to donate to Leaders We Deserve if you're interested. And I know that we also have some people putting in links for local youth-led organizations as well, if you want to check that out. So I think I'm going to pass it over to Kathy and Brandy to close us out for the evening.
Thank you so much, David. And Isabel is totally right. We do leave swearing in. So our people just
I was talking
have
about my email more than anything.
Oh, no, not at all. Unless you'd like us to, we can take it out.
Please don't. Please don't.
Okay, good.
But I want to hear from you all on this call.
Well, I have heard that women have to be asked 7 times to run for office. So
It's always a prime number. It's like 7 times or 3 times. Yeah, it's
9
it's more than
times.
once, which is what
Yeah,
it.
many times. Yeah, and for everybody trying to recruit Isabel in the chat, that is not allowed. She is ours. Thank you so much, David. I am so grateful that you got to join us. We could ask you a million more questions, and hopefully we'll get to meet up in person someday. If you're ever in Arizona, please look us up. Thank you so much.